get it started. And yeah, thank you, Bill Durland.
Ruth said, I think at least 3 times, that I have to limit myself to 10 minutes. I've never done that before. And I noticed that tonight they're putting the clocks back, so we'll see what happens. I want to bring you back before the Big Bang.
The microphone isn't working.
It's not.
Microphone's not on.
It's not.
Oh, it's going to be on. Never mind. You want him to speak from the microphone?
Oh, no, okay.
It's for the
It's
video.
for the video. We'll get that.
Oh, talk to the video.
No.
No, talk to the microphone.
It's all fine. It's working fine for the video.
The microphone is for the video.
You thought
Do what you were doing.
like you
You're
were
good.
doing.
You're good.
Now you've wasted 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much.
You can use this as a live one.
They're both
And then I have to get farther away from you. Why do I have to
Does he
do
need
something
it?
You didn't.
Does he need the live mic?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, and unfortunately I went through all the funny stuff. So before the Big Bang, I want to show how 4 groups got together to form this group, why and what happened. And it all started in 1978, and I think it's very important that we remember some of the people that were in this timeline, in this process. We were in Philadelphia, Jeannie and I, in 1977, and we went to a meeting of a group called the Movement for a New Society. And at the New Society, they had several different groups. One was called a Church Mouse Collective. And while we were there, they were talking about war tax resistance. Now, we had been individual war tax resistors, and we talked about this in this meeting, but we hadn't any collective identity at all. I met a woman there by the name of Sandra Boston. I'd never met her before. She was in this collective, and a Quaker, and she said that for some years there has been no a person with legal knowledge that has been in this movement, and there have been back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, so there had been a hiatus, and could we somehow or other collect ourselves together into a group. And so in Philadelphia, we formed the Center for Law and Pacifism through Bob Anthony's case that I took to the Supreme Court, and formed the Center on Law and Pacifism in May of 1978. There goes 2 minutes. And we had an annual meeting in 1978 in the fall, and a very wonderful person, as some of you may know, by the name of John Suchard, got up in that meeting and said, reminded us of Martin Luther King's statement that all we ask of America is to be true to what you said on paper. And that inspired all of us that came from all parts of the country. Ed Pearson, who was with the Conscience and Military Tax Campaign that formed about the same time in '78. And we were all predated by Ed Hedeman and the War Resisters League that gave us impetus, and peacemakers. And so Ron Nippert was there from that, and John Landau from CCCO. And out of that, we formed the Center on Law and Pacifism. And Robert Randall was one of the first counselors that we had way back, only a few months after we began. We produced a war tax resistance booklet that we didn't have a name for quite at that time. And we brought 4 cases to the Supreme Court, and we actually embedded the international law defense and the 9th Amendment defense that were taken to the Supreme Court that denied the validity, the morality, and the very truth of these arguments in American history. Although war tax resistance was our primary focus, we also did poverty, prisons, and conscientious objection, and we were talking in some of the get-togethers in this meeting that one good idea is to latch war tax resistance onto other groups and integrate the various things we're doing in war resistance. And so we were doing that way back at that time, and then came to Colorado Springs to open up a western branch of the National Center on Law and Pacifism, and that's when we met several of these people in this room that I would like to thank again in helping us organize the western branch that became the national branch once again, and that was Steve Handon and Bill Salzman. The very first week we were here, we started draft counseling and offered that for conscientious objectors at Fort Carson. Donna Johnson gave us her building. I'm talking quite fast to get through with the 10 minutes. And also took some pictures for us, as she's still doing today. The newsletter that we put out before that also didn't have a name, and Mary sprung a phrase where she suggested the name, and it was that name after that, Centerpiece. And People Pay for Peace was the name of the first war tax resistance document that we put out. I was sitting in our office one day, and I must say I had sort of a Rosa Parks feeling about me. I felt that now we had 4 groups: Peacemaker, War Resisters League, the Center on Law and Pacifism, and Conscience and Military Tax Campaign. And although we were doing distinctive things, and things that each group was not doing in its entirety, we were also overlapping ourselves and duplicating our work. And I was tired. And I got this idea that perhaps maybe we should do something about that kind of bureaucracy. And so, in September of 1982 in D.C., we came together for the purposes of finding ways to make the national war tax resistance movement, already very active, quote, more visibly and functionally cohesive and coordinated by forming a national coalition and coordinating body. And that was our original theme, out of which those points that Ruth read to you came about through what's called a egalitarian participatory process that you know all about, with a lot of interesting things that went on. Those very serious points, but we also had some fun, although I guess some people didn't think it was so funny. We had at the meeting the Bromleys, the Nelsons, the McCrackens, George Rodkey, Francis Schwab, Ed Hedeman, Ed Pearson, Ron Nippert, David Zarymka, Don Mosley, many people, 70 people in all. And at the next meeting we had in St. Louis, which I believe was in November, we brought several posters. Where's Mary Lynn? Mary Lynn here?
She's getting ready for something.
Yeah, Mary Lynn had designed for us 3 posters that we brought to the meeting because we wanted to have a logo. We had already picked the name at the first meeting, the National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee. And some people began to call it NWTRCC immediately before we even voted on it. And some people thought that, gee, are we new tricks? Tricks didn't have a very good connotation in those days, and we didn't want to be tricks. And yet we were calling it NWTRCC, but when you look at it, it's not NWTRCC. So Logical Bill, the logic teacher, suggested for Ed Pearson, who was not so happy with resistance, that we put the word assistance in, make the name even longer, and have the National War Tax Resistance and Assistance Coordinating Committee, and we could all go home and call it NWTRCC. It was either voted down or by some kind of consensus or unanimity. It never happened, so we became NWTRCC without the A. The other, and that took about 2 or 3 hours. People were serious about it. And then when we went to St. Louis, and where is, can I walk over here with this? Where's Mary Lynn's cover? I don't have it here, but you're very familiar with it on the War Tax Resistance logo that we now have, with a cannon with a dove at the end. And yeah, that's it. So that was one of the 3 posters. The other 2 wound up on my War Tax Resistance books that Jeannie has in her hand. You can look at over there.
You remember that one.
And the resistance.
This is the first edition.
The resistance to that logo was that somebody thought that the dove was a flower, and the flour was a little too soft for resistance. And we spent maybe 60 minutes hearing from people all over the country about whether it was a dove or a flower, or whether that dove or flower was going to represent us at the end of that canon. And after all of that, we came to an agreement, and we adopted that logo, and we still have it today, and that's thanks to Mary Lynn Sheets. Well, we met in San Francisco, as was stated by Ruth, in February 1983. And one other thing that we wanted to do once we were coordinated was to come to an agreement on a coordinated action nationally for Tax Day 1983. So unlike having different tax days in very local areas, we were going to coordinate all those local tax days to be in touch with each other before and after, and to really make an impression nationally, and that's what we did as our first New Track operation, and that took place in April 1983, and we met in New York at the War Resisters League to congratulate ourselves. At the same time, World Peace Tax Fund was emerging, and through all those years, Jeannie and I wound up in the tax court in 2006 with two arguments before that court. We won one and we lost one. That's pretty good for war tax resistance, isn't it? And subsequent to that time, having won that, we went under the tax level, and we've never been heard from since, even by you. So here we are back, and happy to see you all again. And that is probably over 10 minutes, but wasn't it good?
Trash laying
Should we do one more t-shirt right quick?
Yeah. Wasn't it good for an old man?
Here comes the drawing. Pick a name, any name. Who is it?
I guess you just did.
You did.
No, I didn't.
Ken Freeland.
Texas.
Texas wins big.
Yeah.
Sure, any shirt.
Big state.
All right. Stay tuned.
Okay, next.
All right. Anybody that was involved in the practice of this one earlier today, come on up. Jim, I think you can go ahead and do that.
That's the agenda.
Hold that so I can see it with you. There you go.
Sharon, maybe pass a few of these out.
Yeah. Y'all could come down this side a little bit.
Yeah, help him out.
All right. Well, Jim Stockwell and I had a fair amount of miles to get over here from North Carolina, and this kind of came out in the middle somewhere. Luckily, we did have a title of it from our Susan, who joined us for the last 500 miles. So we have what we think is a creative icon of the movement about to appear before your very eyes on this 30th anniversary to honor one particular individual that shall go unnamed until the end of the song. Or maybe it's in the first line. Okay, I need a little beat.
You want it on time?
Robert went resisting and he didn't pay. Robert went resisting and he didn't pay. Robert went resisting and he didn't pay. He said there just ain't no way. Okay, got it? Everybody can sing along. The IRS said you must pay. The IRS said you must pay. The IRS said I wouldn't pay the president. Okay, and then they said, your arguments are frivolous. Your arguments are frivolous. Your arguments are frivolous. We'll come and grab your ass. My buddy's down at New Track. My buddy's down at New Track. My buddy's down at New Track. They all got my back. So Robert stood firm on his ground. Oh, yes, he did. So Robert stood firm on his ground. So Robert stood firm on his ground. They ruffled his feathers and couldn't get him down. Then Robert went on to organize. Then Robert went on to organize. Oh, yes, he did. Then Robert went on to organize to show how not to militarize. Yes, he did.
Last one.
All right. And so goes the resistance. And so goes the resistance. And so goes the resistance. We resisted our war taxes. Robert Randall, everyone. We give you Robert Randall. Come on. This man here has been around for a fair piece of time. In fact, he
Not as long as Joffrey.
but he has been at more meetings than Joffrey, though he has not taken the Greyhound bus to all the meetings. And that goes to the Greyhound Bus Award later on. So we want to present this thank you to Robert Randall, who has given of his time, his great file of papers, his copious note-taking, his good joking at just about every single meeting, and even down to his snoring during these events at night. We do want to present this certificate of appreciation, Robert Randall.